Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, I'm Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. So I've had the honor and the pleasure of getting to know Diana Fryc for actually over a bunch of months now. It's been more conversations than either of us ever realized we would have, and we keep showing up in each other's lives. So I think we're both pretty excited to just bring you a conversation today. But let me give you just a little piece of background, and then Diana will expand on it. Diana believes that business should be a force for good and uses her networking superpowers to drive change in the food, beverage, and wellness industries, specifically in the areas employment, diversity, food equality, and the promotion of sustainable supply chains. Now, listeners, those of you who've been following Her Success Story for quite a while, we've never actually talked much about this stuff. So I think it's really fascinating, and I'm looking forward to the comments you leave behind so we can actually bring you more of what you're looking for. I also want to share that Diana is the founder and host of a podcast called The Gooder Podcast, where she interviews the powerful women leading on every level in food, beverage, and wellness. So if you are in these industries, food, beverage, and wellness, you want to be listening and you want to be sharing forward. Diana, thanks for joining me here today.
Oh my goodness, Ivy. Hello again. Love it. I love it.
So share, I know we have so much fun. I mean, we just, listeners, just so you know, when we got on, we just started laughing and having fun. We said, oh, right, we have to record a podcast. In this, let's take a pause here for a second and a step back and share a little bit of your background and how you got into this industry and how this area has become your passion.
Well, it kind of goes twofold. So the podcast is an outcropping of the experiences I've had in the industry, in our industry. And I talked about food, beverage, and wellness. The firm that my business partner and I have, we are actually a brand consultancy, and we've been working on rebuilding or building new brands from the scratch in this category since 2011. Prior to that, we were generalists. We worked with lots of different brands, but became very passionate after the last Great Recession, when we said, what are we going to do? Who are we going to be? Who are the people that we want to help? And we decided we want to move into the naturals category. And part of that, there are two sides of the story to that. On my side of the story, my upbringing from my parents, my parents were immigrants, and my dad liked to help fellow immigrants coming into the United States. And so he was frequently helping people find jobs, find housing, that sort of thing. In addition to that, right around 2000 or so, I had the joy of meeting and working on a project with Jane Goodall. And at the time, I was pretty far down the food chain. I wasn't in a strategic role. I was an implementer, and my job was to actually figure out how to manufacture all of her brand assets. And those of you that are old enough to remember things like folders and brochures and sell sheets and all the things that we still have, but not in great demand. My job was to produce everything that had been strategically designed, but the mandate from Jane Goodall was that I needed to find printers and manufacturers that had the highest standards of environmental footprint, fair trade practices, and there's something else I can't remember as well. That's safety. And then also I had to find all the hard good products. So like the paper and the ink and like every aspect of everything that was required to manufacture her business and marketing tools had to be researched to meet her personal and her brand's POV of doing no harm to the planet. Right.
And I'm going to jump in. So listeners, for those of you who just joined at the beginning, at the beginning, I said, Dan and I were chatting and laughing. people who have followed her success story and know my background, I spent 20 years as a printer.
Oh,
right.
okay.
So, in my early days for your previous assignments, we looked at things of how much pre and post recycle waste is in paper. Can you use soy inks and get the color enhancement that non-soy inks? So it was a very, very early.
It was super early. It was very early
in that marketplace.
Yeah, this is in 2000. So the internet didn't exist anywhere near the level. So I literally I was calling manufacturers all around the world. And if they didn't fit the bill, I had to ask them who they knew. I was literally calling people all around the clock. And I needed them to then, if they said that they adhered to these certain things, I needed them to then send me documentation that they weren't flooding rice fields or they were paying fair wages. And the US did not have very good standards either. So I was literally calling all over the world to find the best manufacturers, the best supply chain. And at the end of the day, realized from all of my research the impact that was having. And then from there, after we completed that project, and of course I progressed in my career, I actually started working for a paper distributor. Isn't that funny? This small world, and became one of the number one environmental impact and drivers of product in the Northwest. So I was educating brands, designers, consumers, and everything about the use of not just recycled paper, but all the environmental impact around paper, reducing recycling, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was so ingrained. That one project that I had with Jane basically impacted me and who I was in business, that even today, business should be a force for good is so much bigger. It's just much bigger than I would have expected it to be at that time. So there you go.
So what about, how did then the food and beverage area come to, come forward, and I want to be clear with food, beverage, and wellness.
Yeah. Well, because they're all very intertwined. So that came a little bit more from because my parents were immigrants, we actually didn't eat a whole lot of processed food. And so, you
didn't grow up on the frozen dinners and Kraft macaroni and cheese and all, none. Right? You ate, you're from the era that your parents and if you wanted cheese, you went to the cheese store. You wanted meat, you went to the meat store. You wanted bread, you went to the bakery.
Or my mother made it.
Right. Or your mom made it. And you would do X amount of stops. So you were eating, and you were brought up eating very, very true, clean food. And so that was part of my world. And then my business partner at the time had a child that had significant food allergies that Western medicine at the time in 2011 were not recognizing as significant factors, that if you only had an allergy if it killed you, but anything less than killing you was not an allergy and should not have an impact on the business. So he had started investigating. If you didn't need an EpiPen truly, then you know what, you'll just deal with it. You might have dry skin, you might have a rash, you might have rosacea, you might have you might not feel well, you might be bloated, et cetera, et cetera.
And in his son's example, what happened was he would get a cold and the cold would turn into pneumonia. So he was taking antibiotics anywhere from 4 to 8 times a year.
Wow.
And it was because he was allergic to cow milk. So he went down the naturopathic route. This feels like 1846, but it was just only in the last few years that we've understood that food and wellness are intertwined. They are not separate. And you can live a healthier life without medication. So in 2011, when we said, what are we going to do with our firm? We both said, we're going to help these brands that are trying to are trying to break into the system and just don't have the experience or expertise. Naturals brands in 2011 was still an emerging market and people were not really into it. Kellogg's wasn't doing it. Pepsi wasn't doing it. Now all of these multinationals are doing it. So what we wanted to do in 2011 was help these brands to normalize that you can have better for you products out there. You don't need to have fillers. You don't need to have extenders. You don't need to have preservatives or unnatural preservatives, and that you could do that. So we repositioned our brand in 2011 and we haven't turned back. The last 3 years, the naturals industry has exploded. However, and the boundaries of what naturals is a little bit blurry because the big multinational brands have blurred the lines of health. And
so can you explain a little bit like what naturals is and what it's not?
Yeah. So the traditional term naturals was organic certified, non-GMO. Naturals now is, instead of like you're either a naturals or you're not a naturals, naturals is kind of shifted to something called the Better For You platform. And the Better For You platform is really, really wide in that you can have extreme, you can be a vegan, organic, natural, fair trade. You can be the cleanest product, the most environmental product, the most everything product, all the way down the food chain to a baked potato chip instead of a fried potato chip. Because what we found is if you are wanting to change the health of the human race, or let's just say Americans, because we have such crummy diets by and large, unless you're really healthy, aka wealthy, then you have great diet. But if you are moderate income and down, you have questionable diet. And most of that is because you're not being marketed to, because Better For You brands have been marketing to healthy and wealthy people. And most adults get their education through advertising, strangely enough, but true, unless they seek it on their own. But if you're looking at somebody who's saying drinking a Mountain Dew and eating Cheetos, they are not going to switch to a kale diet overnight. So what we have to do is we have to create this path. You go from a fried product to a baked product. Then you go from a baked product to maybe there's one good ingredient in there. There is a path to getting people to eat healthier, because most people, unless they have some sort of massive event happen in their life, like a heart attack or a stroke themselves, because research even says that even if your parent or your child has something happen to them, that is not enough for you to change. It always has to be you. We have to take people down this path of Better For You health and wellness. And so in one ways, the blurring of the line of Better For You and healthy and natural has been not kind or not good. But if you look at the fact that we can get people to move into healthier and healthier diets by incremental changes, then it's good.
So in this whole, I would have probably referred to as a revolution.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We have kale chips out there.
Yep.
We're assuming they're baked. Might be some fried. But we have an evolution and revolution around in the food industry, in food and beverage, as well as wellness.
Yeah.
With that, what has surprised you in the recent years in this evolution?
I think the biggest surprise has been, frankly, it's come from a lot of the conversations that I've had with the women on my podcast, and the revelation that the Better For You industry, the Better For You products industry, or the health and wellness industry, it could be food, it could be gym, it could be equipment, it could be whatever, is very much geared towards people who have high discretionary income, and subsequently the most educated, and subsequently the most healthiest group or most healthiest audience in the United States. And there is, I think, a misconception that people who are not rich or people who are not wealthy are not interested in being healthy, or they can't afford to be healthy. And I think for me, it's been this constant conversation. And I've had, so I have at least one every week where I'm talking to a prospective client for brand development. And I'll say, well, did you know that somebody who is median income or lower, even those that are on public assistance, are typically stronger brand advocates than those that have discretionary income. Those with discretionary income can afford to be fickle, so they can change their mind on what product they want to try. And if they don't like it, they'll throw it away or they'll buy something new next time. People who have moderate or incomes and below, once they find something that works for them and they do want to be healthier, they just want to know that it tastes good, because that's still where they are in their path, that it tastes good and that their family will eat it and it won't be wasted. They will buy that product over and over and over and over again, because they know that it won't be wasted. And so it's the looking at what we thought was an opportunity through a completely different lens.
So it's a complete reversal of what we think we know.
Yeah.
You know, because I actually, complete disclosure, just had this conversation with somebody, and we were talking about organic meat and clean meat and grass-fed meat and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, I realize it might cost a little more.
Yeah.
And we're both worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took us down this discussion, and the discussion started because I had bought a grass-fed piece of meat, and my husband was like, "Oh my goodness, this is fabulous, fabulous, fabulous." I said, "Well, it's grass-fed." He goes, "Oh, that does not matter." And so the next time he went to the store, he goes, "I want to get those steaks you got." And I said, "Oh, it's exactly, you go to the butcher counter. This is what you ask for, the grass-fed sirloin, blah, 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 blah." And we made dinner that night. And he goes, you didn't do the same thing to the steak. It doesn't taste the same. And I said, interesting. Did you actually buy what I said? And he's like, "Look, I bought the sirloins." I said, no. Did you buy the grass-fed, the non,
Right.
It has no antibiotics, it has no this, it's no hormones, this, that, and the other thing. And he goes, "You mean it really matters?" And, this led to this discussion of, are we worth it? And whether you eat meat or whether you don't eat meat, or however you lead your life.
Yeah.
I am a firm believer of, the cleaner we go, the better opportunity I can enjoy my life longer. It doesn't mean I'm going to live life longer, but that I will be healthy and I will enjoy my life.
Yeah. That's really it at the end of the day. You want your body and your brain to work, and your emotions, because that's all its own complete system. You want them working as long as possible, because nobody wants to die at 100 and have been ill for the previous 10 years. That's the worst thing that you could ask for. Rather live to be 85 than so it really is
a robust 85.
Right. And so it's like, and so in fact it's why wouldn't you, if this is even, I can hear it in myself. Why wouldn't you do everything that you can to help you live your life longer? And that is everything from exercise to what you put in and on your body. And don't get me wrong, our bodies are really, really strong. And we have lived a long time with all sorts of things impacting our body. But at some point, we as humans need to be able to step up and go, okay, well, for every Cheeto I eat, I need to eat a bowl of kale, or whatever that rationale is in your head. Find that balance, find a way to keep yourself healthier, because number one, you don't want to be a burden on family. And number two, I think, who wants to live like that?
So Dana, I want to ask you this. in the new age of health and wellness in the food and beverage area,
Mm-hmm.
are we seeing, and not that it matters, it's just a curiosity question, are we seeing, women leading the pack as the leaders of the family? Are we seeing more men? Are we seeing an equal demographic? What are we seeing?
Well, we're seeing a combination of both in the last 3 years with the explosion of food technology and what we can do with food, good food and bad food altogether. There's been, and the adoption of this kind of better for you natural type of product category. We're seeing a huge insurgence of what is it called? Investment capital coming out of the tech industry, because it's super sexy and hot to create a product that you can hold in your hand and take to it and go, hey, this is like I just started, I started investing in this beverage or this thing or whatever. It's super hot. With the influx of all of this money comes a transition of people from the traditional product, the traditional brands, into this natural better for you space. And so we've seen a shift from women to men. That's predominantly the reason why I started the podcast, is I wanted to kind of normalize diversity in our category. But I would say that the primary drivers come in two different ways. One are the holistic people, which are people who want to solve a problem. I saw a problem, I want to solve a problem. And I see that predominantly driven by women. I'm developing this product because I saw this need and I wanted to do something about it. On the flip side, we have the innovators, which are predominantly men. These are the tinkerers. These are the ones that are like, how can I slice and dice the thing of a mushroom so that I can create a thing, because I haven't seen it out there and I thought it would be cool. So the leadership comes in two different ways. Still have the shift in people running the companies is still predominantly Caucasian male, as that shift has happened over the past 3 years. But I suspect that's going to change. I don't know how rapidly, because I'm seeing some equilibrium. I think the last year's worth of Black Lives Matter movements has a lot of companies that are in the better for you space, predominantly wanting to normalize things as well. Sometimes they can't help themselves. There's, you still have the concept of systemic racism. This is applied to women and people of disabilities and all sorts of type of in the different areas of differentiation, where it's like, well, these candidates don't have the experience compared to this male white candidate. And so I want the best qualified, particularly if you're a small company and you're feeling like you need to have a heavy hitter in that seat. I think there's still this ideal that you've got to look like this in order to grow like this. So I think the desire is there to change. I don't know how rapidly it will change. I do see that those companies with the most amount of diversity in their leadership actually accelerating faster than those that have more of a traditional organizational structure, or those seats are filled in more traditional ways. Does that make sense?
It does. And it truly is my belief across the board is, when you have a board that sits with a variety of point of views, backgrounds, et cetera, you have the ability to grow a company for a mass marketplace, because you have a mass marketplace at the
mentality.
Leadership. Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Diana, how can our listeners know more, read more about you, inquire, tell us?
Well, if you are interested in one of two ways. One is I've got the Gooder podcast, which is all women leadership in the natural space and kind of surrounding categories. And we talk about things like supply chain and R&D and safety and quality and all of those items. You can find it on the Gooder podcast. The Gooder podcast you will find basically on all of the major platforms. You can also find it on a page on the website of my firm. Like I said, we're a brand and design consultancy specifically for better for you brands in the food, beverage, and wellness space. And our company's name is Retail Voodoo. That's retail-voodoo.com. And always open to connecting with just about anybody on LinkedIn anytime. And if you heard me on this podcast, just let me know. And then I'll know what the heck, how you know me.
I love it. Yes. Reach out to Diana and let her know you heard her on Her Success Story. Listeners, as I always say as we conclude our shows, thank you for taking the time to listen and join Diana and I in our conversation today. If you've dedicated this time and honored yourself with it, take a moment and write down and leave it right here in the show notes, your biggest takeaway from today's show. And step 2, what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Implement. As we listen, learn, honor it by implementation and action. Diana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, Miss Ivy, thank you so much.
And listeners, we'll see you as we continue to drop great episodes like Diana's today, in more and wonderful things coming up and coming your way from Her Success Story. See you next time.